You're listening to today's inspirational message on the Proverbs with Bjorklund.
We're at our point in considering the book of Proverbs where many of the themes are repeated, and this is true again here today. But they're repeated, I believe, for an obvious reason, and that is because they are persistent issues. And so today, here are three things to avoid. First, avoid stealing or convincing yourself that you are somehow above being held to account for integrity. Proverbs 23 verses 10 and 11 say, "Do not move an ancient landmark or enter the fields of the fatherless, for their Redeemer is strong and he will plead their cause against you." Now, in a sense, this is saying don't steal, to move an ancient boundary mark. But this is actually saying much more than this, because we can convince ourselves that moving a boundary is a victimless crime and that it may not be known. In our day and age, we don't really have boundaries like that, but people have talked a lot about systemic injustice. But systemic injustice is not victimless. God sees. And you see, we can convince ourselves that no one's really hurt by what we do, that no one will really pay, that there will be some proverbial person out there or entity that might pay, and that no one will hold us accountable. But what Proverbs teaches us here is that there are victims that God sees and that God will hold us accountable. That's the idea of the Redeemer is strong and he will plead their case against you. And so we need to not convince ourselves, avoid convincing ourselves that we're in the right to act wrong when we do something. Here's a second thing to avoid. Verse 20 of Proverbs. It says, "Do not be among the drunkards or among the gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags." So once again, we see this exhortation to avoid indulgence, overindulgence, eating of meat and drink, because they come to poverty. So often what happens for many of us is that we don't think about our lives as being about overindulgence. We think that we work to indulge. But Proverbs here is just saying, understand that when you indulge, every time you indulge, that you borrow a little something from your future. I've heard it said that the cost of our bad choices is in the future and the benefit is in the present, but the cost of our good choices is in the present and the benefit is in the future. It's a little bit like Proverbs is saying that here about our excessive indulgence. And then the third thing that it teaches us to avoid here, again, returning to this theme over and over again, is this idea of our sensual life. Verse 27, "For a prostitute is a deep pit, an adulteress a narrow well. She lies in wait like a robber and increases the traitors among mankind." And this robber word here means that there's a ruthlessness and an intentional amount of this, because it creates a social disruption. And saying that she's a deep pit means there's no escape, there's no help. Here's how Tim Keller writes about this. And he says, "Adultery not only creates this world practical problems, but also jeopardizes the state of your soul." How? It is true that our beliefs shape our behavior, but our behavior also influences our thinking and belief. Many believers have testified when they violated their conscience that God has become less real to them. I have talked to college students from church backgrounds who started having sex and then they lost their faith. But I have met just as many who lost their faith because they started having sex. So sexual sin can multiply the unfaithful. Derek Kidner put it this way, this is quoted in Tim Keller, he says, "Those who think to explore life this way are flirting with death. It is no mere detour from the best path, but in the fullest sense, it is a dead end." The father here, who's exhorting his son, asks him to give him his heart. It's even better that we would ask the Lord to give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name. Psalm 86:11. And so today, are you indulging in making excuses for avoiding the right things? Are you overindulging in pleasures, whether it be consumable items or sensuality? And do you understand the implication that it may have for your life? Wisdom turns toward God and away from the things that take us away from God.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.